Well, a warm welcome to this talk. Now, of course, many of us hope for fairly rapid changes in the United States with the new administration. For example, looking at COVID vaccines and all the dangers associated with them. Things are starting to move, but really quite slowly. And let's illustrate that now. And we'll also be looking at some of the things that aren't said in this paper I'm about to talk about. Now, this is the paper we're going to talk about here. FDA approved required updated warning and labelling. And that is from this paper here, from the US Food and Drug Administration. Now, these are what the FDA is saying, that the manufacturers must give warnings about the side effects of myocarditis and pericarditis, and they give some data. Now, to be fair, this paper doesn't mention blood clotting, thrombosis and thrombocytopenia. It doesn't mention postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, leg amputations. We saw Alex tragically who had his leg amputated. Doesn't mention small fibre neuropathy. Doesn't mention the constant pain that Brianne Dressing's in. Doesn't mention the transverse myelitis that we interviewed Michael with last week. Persistent fatigue syndrome, immune disorders, Guillain-Barré syndrome, Bell's palsy, seizures, allergy and anaphylaxis, new onset of autoimmune disease, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune hepatitis, reproductive and menstrual irregularities, infertility. Doesn't mention long vaccine syndrome, multiple inflammatory syndrome, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, death and potential cancers. And that's just a list I sort of sketched out that took a few minutes. Doesn't mention any of those. It's talking about myocarditis. So let's stick to what the paper says. Check it out for yourself. That's all the information. Now, mRNA shots. There's also a video here from this guy from the FDA whose name escapes me. What's his name again? I've been watching him. Vinay Prasad. He's been a YouTuber for a long time. He's made this, but he's now speaking for the FDA. So now this paper here, requiring manufacturers to include more safety information in the data that they are giving. So for people aged 6 months through to 64 years, approximately 8.4 cases of inflammatory heart disease per million. So it doesn't sound too many really, too many for what I'd like, of course, but 8.4 per million. But the trouble is, they've been talking about whole population numbers rather than those at particular risk. And that means that people of very high risk categories have been getting these COVID shots completely inappropriately, and I would say unethically. And I'll give evidence for that, or my thinking for that in a minute. Initial and follow-up cardiac MRIs and magnetic resonance imaging, detailed imaging of the heart, commonly showed signs of injury to the heart muscle. Now, the thing about heart muscle is once a heart muscle cell has died, it won't recover. These cells don't recover. So, for example, if you lose some cells on the inside of your cheek or some liver cells, they'll just recover. But muscle cells don't. Same as brain cells don't effectively divide. Well, there is some division, but not healing division. That's why dementia is irreversible. So is damage to the heart muscle. Males 12 through to 24 years, approximately 26.9 cases, and that gives 1 in 37,000. Now, that's, of course, way worse when you look at this particular demographic. But the point is, this is not telling the whole story by any means. And it's not explaining why they didn't act much quicker. Let me show you what I mean. So, for example, February 2021, basically as soon as the vaccine was rolled out, VAERS information indicated that there was cases of C-VAM. Now, this is the new appalling acronym, coronavirus vaccine associated myocarditis. C-VAM is what they're now calling this. Appalling, but that's in the journals now. April 2021, there was 2 deaths and 60 cases from Israel. And the details were sent to the FDA and CDC in April 2021. So they did know they knew there was a marker from February 2021 and for sure by April 2021. And if the Israeli authorities were considerate enough to form the US authorities, we can assume they were polite enough to inform the UK, Canadian, Australian, Kiwi, all would be informed, we would assume. Anyway, let's carry on with this story. 27th of April 2021, CDC statement denies myocarditis signal. But they knew from their own data from February 2021, and they knew from Israeli data from April 2021 that it did exist, but in 27th of April, they flat denied it. What do you call it if someone says something that they know isn't true? 27th of April 2021, CDC was aware of 14 cases reported by the US military. So they knew from the US military there was cases, they knew from Israel there was cases, and they knew from their own VAERS data. So 3 lines of evidence, their own VAERS data, the Israeli data, and the military data, saying there's myocarditis, but they denied it in that same month, April, at the end of April 2021. August 2021, FDA documents from a Freedom of Information request actually indicated it wasn't 1 in 37,500, it was actually 1 in 5,000 in 16 and 17-year-olds. Appallingly high, dangerously high. And of course, this is just the severe cases. We know that there's raised troponins in huge more numbers of cases. Hong Kong data, it was 1 in 2,700, so even more common in 13 to 18-year-olds. And yet the CDC were failing to admit this by April, 27th of April 2021. Freedom of information requests, why were they required? Why wasn't the data freely given? Hong Kong data, as we say, even more common. Vaccine safety link data, 1 in 2,000. After the second dose in 18 to 24-year-olds, males. So 1 in 2,000. This is downright dangerous. And the vaccine safety link data also said that 64% of cases were missed. So most cases were simply missed. Now, the follow-up on this is really quite concerning. And of course, this is only talking about myocarditis and pericarditis, not this long list of other vaccine complications that we brainstormed before. Follow-up information on cardiovascular outcomes from longitudinal prospective observational studies. Now, this is largely based on this and partly based on the talk by Vinay Prasad, who now represents the FDA. Most had received 2-dose primary series prior to diagnosis, so this is mostly after the second dose. Follow-up of approximately 5 months. Persistent abnormal cardiac magnetic resonance imaging, CMRs. So detailed scans of the heart show that this was persistent. The myocardial damage was persistent. That are a marker for myocarditis in 60% of patients. So 6% of patients after 5 months still visible on the MRI. Now, the term now being used by the FDA is latent gadolinium enhancement. So gadolinium is the contrast medium that they'll inject that highlights the damage area of the myocardium on MRI. So if you've got gadolinium enhancement, that's a marker for myocardial injury. And in Australian data, for example, at 6 months, 67% of people with 67% of people complaining. So 67% of people that initially presented with myocarditis still had LGE, latent gadolinium enhancement, 5 months after, and 35% were showing fibrosis. And the fibrosis, of course, will never recover. And you would imagine that most of these will go on to develop fibrosis, because if the heart muscle is dead, the only way it can cure that area of the body, it doesn't cure it, but the only way it can rectify the situation is to make a fibrous patch. At least that means it doesn't leak, but the fibrous patch will never be contractile. Now, vast majority of cases were men, 92% were men, and 72% seemed to carry on, were persistent. And of course, this is not accounting for the spontaneous cardiac death syndromes that we saw with people lying on sports field and things like that, because the myocarditis, if there's myocarditis, we know that predisposes to cardiac arrest, ventricular fibrillation, where the heart muscle just does that, and there's no effective cardiac output. This is not that. These people, they died before they got onto the system. These people with a persistent myocardial damage, yes, they could get a ventricular fibrillation, but they could also go on and develop heart failure, where the myocardium is unable to generate sufficient contractile output to meet the metabolic demands of the body. Clinical and prognostic significance of these CMR findings is not known according to the FDA. I think it is known that to some extent. I think they're being a bit cautious here, a bit non-revealing here. So this LGE from the FDA video that we talked about from slides, based on data from multiple studies, associated with increased future cardiac events and mortality. Cardiac events could be cardiac arrests, could be heart failure, could be failure of valves, could be ongoing pain. So basically we see that this is common, affecting, well, it depends on the study you want to take. Vaccine safety link data 1 in 2,000, Hong Kong data 1 in 2,700. You know, this is so dangerous, the vaccine should be absolutely banned in these age groups. But of course, because of all the other side effects, now the risks, in my view, massively outweigh the potential benefits. Just a few other points briefly from this study. So it's to inform public and healthcare providers. And the FDA is now has required and approved update to the prescribing information for the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. This is all in the paper. You can read that for yourself. So they have to put in the incidence of myocardial damage. They have to put in the results of the study. The main study they're talking about was the FDA funded study, which was this one, which again showed the evidence for the myocardial damage. And of course, we also know from videos that we've done with people like Nick Hushler, who did data on the studies on the post-mortem findings. People that died of acute cardiac disease often had spike protein in the lesions. We've looked at that before as well. So the study, the FDA, is based on inpatient and outpatient data. Estimated and adjusted incidence of myocarditis and pericarditis has to be declared, but it's only 1 through 7 days. So if the myocarditis occurred after that, it wouldn't flag up. And it's only on the 2023-2024 data. That's the study they're talking about there that we've just shown. Follow-up was only on 300 people. I'm sure the United States FDAs can do better than that. Some people in the study reported having heart symptoms approximately 3 months after developing myocarditis, and we saw some definitely at 5 months. But the point is, for a proportion of these, for all of these, the heart damage is not going to get better. 3 years, 5 years, it doesn't matter. The question is, how is it going to deteriorate is the issue. And finally, that is the link for the Vinay Prasad video, which is good. So basically, good that the FDA has paid for the study, good that the FDA is insisting on more safety data to be made public, both to health professionals and to the general public. Bad that the way this paper talks about myocarditis, it's ignoring all these other long list of adverse reactions. And this was just a brainstorm. If I went to the literature, I'm sure I could find 100 more. So clearly these products should be banned until proven safe. And I don't see how they ever could be proven safe, because they're not, unless the technology dramatically changes. So FDA marks out of 10. Yeah, under Biden it was probably 0 or negative. This, it's some attempt. I'll give them 3 or 4 out of 10, maybe 3 out of 10, but they could do much better and give us more data and be more forthright. And this needs to feed through into the commissioning, purchasing cycle of these products. It needs to feed through into all the new mRNA factories that are being built around the world that need to be suspended until a particular technology is proven safe. The FDA are going to insist on more RCTs in future, randomized controlled trials, but personally I would think that these products are so dangerous it's unethical to recruit to them. So slight improvements, not as fast as we would like. Let's hope for acceleration, and we look to the FDA for continued enhanced realism in the future. But for now, thank you for watching.